For as long as anyone could remember, the people of Red Valley and the Apache tribes beyond the mountains had lived with fear between them. Stories of old battles were passed from one generation to another. Settlers warned their children about Apache warriors. Apache elders spoke of broken promises and stolen lands. Few people remembered how the conflict had started. They only knew that it had lasted for many years. Governor William Hart was one of the most respected leaders in the territory. He worked hard to protect his people and maintain order. His daughter Eleanor Hart was known throughout the region for her intelligence and kindness. Unlike many others, Eleanor was curious about the world beyond the governor's mansion. She often wondered if the stories about the Apache people were really true. One morning she rode into the countryside with 2 guards. She wanted to visit a small settlement near the edge of the territory and deliver supplies to several families. The journey began peacefully. The sun shone brightly across the hills, and a cool wind moved through the grasslands. But as they entered a narrow canyon, everything changed. A group of armed outlaws suddenly appeared from behind the rocks. The guards immediately drew their weapons. "Protect Miss Hart," one of them shouted. The outlaws attacked without hesitation. The canyon erupted into chaos. The guards fought bravely, but they were heavily outnumbered. Eleanor's horse became frightened and threw her to the ground. Before she could escape, 2 outlaws grabbed her. Their leader stepped forward with a cruel smile. "A governor will pay a fortune to get his daughter back," he said, fear-filled. Eleanor's heart. She looked around desperately, but her guards had been overwhelmed. For the first time in her life, she believed she might never see her home again. Then a sharp cry echoed across the canyon. Every head turned. A lone rider appeared on a ridge above them. The stranger sat tall upon a powerful horse. His long dark hair moved in the wind. Apache warrior. The outlaws laughed. "One man against all of us," their leader mocked. The warrior did not answer. Instead, he charged down the slope like a storm. Within moments, the canyon became a battlefield. The warrior moved with incredible speed and skill. He disarmed one outlaw after another. Several men fled in panic before he even reached them. The remaining outlaws quickly realized they were facing someone far more dangerous than they had expected. Their leader attempted to seize Eleanor and use her as a shield. Before he could move, an arrow struck the ground directly in front of him. The warning was clear. The outlaw released her immediately. Moments later, the surviving criminals ran for their lives. Silence returned to the canyon. Eleanor stood trembling as the warrior approached. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The Apache warrior finally stepped down from his horse. "Are you hurt?" he asked calmly. His voice surprised her. There was no anger in it. "Only concern. No," she replied softly. "Thank you." The warrior nodded. "My name is Tako. Eleanor could not look away from him. He was unlike the frightening image she had heard about her entire life. There was strength in him, but also kindness. For the first time, she questioned everything she had been taught. And neither of them knew that this meeting would soon change the fate of 2 peoples forever. Eleanor expected Tako to leave after saving her. Instead, he stayed long enough to make sure she was safe. The surviving guards gathered around her and thanked the Apache warrior. Even they seemed surprised by what had happened. One of them approached cautiously. "We can take Miss Hart home from here." Tako nodded. "Then my work is done." Before he could leave, Eleanor stepped forward. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Tako looked at her for a moment. "Because innocent people should not suffer." The answer was simple, but it stayed in her mind. Most people she knew spoke about politics, power, and old grudges. Tako spoke only about what was right. As he mounted his horse, Eleanor suddenly realized she might never see him again. "Thank you, Tako." He gave her a respectful nod. "Safe travels, Eleanor Hart." A few moments later, he disappeared into the distant hills. The journey back to Red Valley felt different. Eleanor could think of nothing except the Apache warrior. When she arrived home, Governor Hart rushed to greet her. His face filled with relief when he saw she was unharmed. After hearing about the attack, his expression became serious. "Who rescued you?" he asked. "An Apache warrior named Dakota." The governor's face immediately hardened. "An Apache. Father, he saved my life." "That may be true," the governor replied, "but never forget who they are." Eleanor wanted to argue but remained silent. At evening she sat alone on a balcony, overlooking the town. For the first time she wondered if fear had blinded both sides for too many years. Several days passed. Life returned to normal, but Eleanor could not stop thinking about the canyon. Then an opportunity appeared. A local missionary planned to deliver medicine to a settlement near Apache territory. Eleanor volunteered to help. Governor reluctantly agreed as long as she traveled with an escort. The journey lasted 2 days. On the second afternoon, the group reached a small river near the mountains. While gathering water, Eleanor noticed movement among the trees. Her heart raced. A familiar figure stepped into the sunlight. He seemed just as surprised to see her. Eleanor smiled before she could stop herself. Apache warrior smiled as well. It was the first time she had seen him do. "So, you travel dangerous roads." "Governor's daughter," he said. "Perhaps," she replied, "but they seem safer when you are nearby." Dakota laughed softly. The sound surprised her. The fearsome warrior, suddenly, seemed very human. For the next hour they spoke beside the river. Eleanor learned that Dakota was one of the most respected warriors in his tribe. He protected villages, guided hunters, and often settled disputes among neighboring clans. Dakota learned that Eleanor spent much of her time helping families and teaching children to read. The more they talked, the more they realized how much they had in common. Both dreamed of peace. Both were tired of hatred. Both wanted a better future. As the sun began to set, Dakota's expression became serious. "There are men who want war again," he said. "I have heard rumors among the tribes." Eleanor frowned. "What kind of rumors?" "Attacks against settlers. Raids that no one can explain. Some believe Apache warriors are responsible." "And you do not?" Dakota shook his head. "No. Someone is trying to make both sides fear each other." A cold feeling passed through Eleanor. If he was right, something dangerous was already beginning. Neither of them knew that dark forces were moving in secret. And soon both their lives would be caught in a storm far greater than either could imagine. The rumors Dakota had spoken about soon became reality. Only 3 days after Eleanor returned to Red Valley, a group of settlers arrived in town carrying wounded men. Panic spread quickly. They claimed an Apache war party had attacked a trading caravan near the northern pass. Angry voices filled the streets. Many demanded revenge. Governor Hart immediately called a meeting with town leaders. Inside the council hall, fear and anger grew with every passing minute. Eleanor listened carefully. Something felt wrong. The witnesses described the attackers as Apache warriors, yet several details did not match what Dakota had told her about his people. The attackers had burned supplies. Apache warriors rarely destroyed food. The attackers had stolen gold. Apache tribes had little interest in gold. The story made less sense the more she heard it. That evening Eleanor secretly left town and rode toward the river where she had last seen Dakota. She hoped he would be there. As darkness settled across the land, a figure emerged from the trees. Tako. His expression was serious. "You heard about the attack," he said. Yes. Yes. Is not your people? Dakota nodded. No. How can you be sure? Because one of my scouts followed the attackers. Eleanor's eyes widened. Who were they? Dakota looked around carefully before answering. Men, wearing Apache clothing, but they were not Apache. Someone wants war. The same conclusion both had feared. If the truth was not discovered quickly, Hundreds could die. Takoda led Eleanor deeper into the forest. There, hidden among the trees, she met several Apache scouts. One of them placed a strange silver badge in her hand. "We found this with the attackers." Camped. Eleanor recognized it immediately. It belonged to Colonel Victor Kane, a military commander stationed far from the territory. The colonel was ambitious and ruthless. Many people respected him, but others feared him. Why would he do this? Eleanor asked. Takoda's face remained calm. Perhaps war benefits him. The answer troubled her. Before she could respond, hoofbeats echoed through the forest. One of the scouts rushed forward. "More riders are coming." Everyone quickly moved into the shadows. A group of armed men appeared on the trail. Eleanor immediately recognized Colonel Kane among them. The soldiers stopped near a clearing. Takoda and Eleanor watched from concealment. What they heard changed everything. "The governor still believes the Apache are responsible," Kane said. "Good," one of the men replied. "Once the tribes retaliate, the army will move in. Then we control the entire territory." Eleanor felt her heart pound. The attacks were planned. The hatred was being manufactured. People were being manipulated into war. Suddenly a branch snapped beneath one of the scouts. Every soldier turned. "Who's there?" Kane shouted. Within seconds, the forest exploded into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the trees. Takoda grabbed Eleanor's hand. "Run." They raced through the darkness as bullets struck nearby branches. Several Apache scouts created diversions to slow the soldiers. Takoda guided Eleanor toward a narrow canyon. The chase continued for miles. Finally, they reached safety deep within Apache territory. Breathing heavily, Eleanor looked at him. "No one will believe us," she said. "Then we must find proof," Takoda answered. For a moment, neither spoke. The danger surrounding them had never been greater. Yet standing there beneath the stars, Eleanor realized something else. Every time she was near Takoda, she felt safe. And every day her feelings for him grew stronger. Far away, Colonel Kane watched the darkness where they had escaped. A cold smile appeared on his face. "Find them," he ordered. "If they expose us, everything is lost." The hunt had begun. For the first time in her life, Eleanor entered an Apache village. The settlement stood beside a crystal river, surrounded by towering mountains. Children played freely among the lodges, while elders shared stories around evening fires. Nothing looked like the frightening tales she had heard growing up. People smiled. Families laughed together. Life felt peaceful. Many villagers watched Eleanor with curiosity. Some welcomed her kindly, while others remained cautious. Years of conflict could not be forgotten overnight. Takoda understood their concerns. He spent the following days helping Eleanor earn their trust. She assisted healers, taught children how to read simple words, and listened respectfully to the elders. Slowly, the walls between them began to fall. One evening, an elder named Nenton invited Eleanor to sit beside the fire. The old man studied her carefully. "You crossed a great distance to stand among us. Not just in miles." Eleanor nodded. "I am beginning to understand that." The elder smiled. "Sometimes peace begins with one brave step." Across the village, Takoda watched the conversation. His respect for Eleanor grew each day. Most settlers feared what they did not know. She chose to learn. That night they walked together beside the river. The moon reflected across the water. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "Everything I believed was wrong." "Not everything," Takoda replied. "Both our peoples have made mistakes. But hatred grows when people stop seeing each other as human." Eleanor looked at him. "And what do you see when you look at me?" Takoda stopped walking. For a moment, he seemed unsure how to answer. "I see someone brave enough to challenge what she was taught." His words warmed her heart. She smiled. "And I see a warrior who risks everything to protect people, who may never thank him. Their eyes met. The world around them seemed to disappear. Neither moved away. Neither wanted to dot. Then distant shouting shattered the moment. "Hey!" Ryder entered the village at full speed. Everyone rushed toward the center of the settlement. The scout jumped from his horse. His face was pale. Soldiers are moving toward the western valley. Several Apache leaders gathered immediately. Takoda stepped forward. How many? More than 100. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The situation was becoming dangerous. If the soldiers entered Apache territory, war could begin at any moment. Takoda joined the tribal council. Eleanor listened from nearby. Some warriors demanded that they strike first. Others urged caution. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, Takoda stood. "If we attack now, we give Colonel Kane exactly what he wants." Silence followed. "Then what do you propose?" one elder asked. "We find proof of his crimes before blood is spilled." The council reluctantly agreed. The next morning, Takoda prepared a small group for a dangerous mission. Their goal was simple: infiltrate Kane's supply camp and gather evidence. When Eleanor learned of the plan, she immediately volunteered. "No," Takoda said, "It is too dangerous. You are going because people trust you." She crossed her arms. "And people trust me on the other side." Takoda knew she was right. Reluctantly, he agreed. The group departed before sunrise. For 2 days, they traveled through mountains and forests. On the third night, they finally reached Kane's hidden camp. Hundreds of soldiers occupied the valley. Takoda and Eleanor slipped through the darkness, while the others stood watch. Inside the command tent, they discovered maps, attack plans, and detailed records of the false raids. It was everything they needed. But as Eleanor gathered the documents, a voice suddenly echoed behind them. "Looking for these?" They turned. Colonel Kane stood at the entrance, surrounded by armed soldiers. His trap had worked, and now there was nowhere left to run. For the first time in her life, Eleanor entered an Apache village. The settlement stood beside a crystal river surrounded by towering mountains. Children played freely among the lodges, while elders shared stories around evening fires. Nothing looked like the frightening tales she had heard growing up. People smiled. Families laughed together. Life felt peaceful. Many villagers watched Eleanor with curiosity. Some welcomed her kindly, while others remained cautious. Years of conflict could not be forgotten overnight. Takoda understood their concerns. He spent the following days helping Eleanor earn their trust. She assisted healers, taught children how to read simple words, and listened respectfully to the elders. Slowly, the walls between them began to fall. One evening, an elder named Nanton invited Eleanor to sit beside the fire. The old man studied her carefully. "You crossed a great distance to stand among us. Not just in miles." Eleanor nodded. "I'm beginning to understand that." The elder smiled. "Sometimes peace begins with one brave step." Across the village, Takoda watched the conversation. His respect for Eleanor grew each day. Most settlers feared what they did not know. She chose to learn. That night, they walked together beside the river. The moon reflected across the water. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "Everything I believed was wrong." "Not everything," Takoda replied. "Both our peoples have made mistakes. A hatred grows when people stop seeing each other as human." Eleanor looked at him. "And what do you see when you look at me?" Takoda stopped walking. For a moment, he seemed unsure how to answer. "I see someone brave enough to challenge what she was taught." His words warmed her heart. She smiled. "And I see a warrior who risks everything to protect people who may never thank him." Their eyes met. The world around them seemed to disappear. Neither moved away, neither wanted to. Then distant shouting shattered the moment. Ryder entered the village at full speed. Everyone rushed toward the center of the settlement. The scout jumped from his horse. His face was pale. Soldiers are moving toward the western valley. Several Apache leaders gathered immediately. Takoda stepped forward. How many? More than 100? Murmurs spread through the crowd. The situation was becoming dangerous. If the soldiers entered Apache territory, war could begin at any moment. Takoda joined the tribal council. Eleanor listened from nearby. Some warriors demanded that they strike first. Others urged caution. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, Takoda stood. If we attack now, we give Colonel Kane exactly what he wants. Silence followed. Then, what do you propose? One elder asked. We find proof of his crimes before blood is spilled. The council reluctantly agreed. The next morning, Takoda prepared a small group for a dangerous mission. Their goal was simple: infiltrate Kane's supply camp and gather evidence. When Eleanor learned of the plan, she immediately volunteered. No, Takoda said. It is too dangerous. You are going because people trust you. She crossed her arms. And people trust me on the other side. Takoda knew she was right. Reluctantly, he agreed. The group departed before sunrise. For 2 days, they traveled through mountains and forests. On the third night, they finally reached Kane's hidden camp. Hundreds of soldiers occupied the valley. Takoda and Eleanor slipped through the darkness while the others stood watch. Inside the command tent, they discovered maps, attack plans, and detailed records of the false raids. It was everything they needed. But as Eleanor gathered the documents, a voice suddenly echoed behind them. Looking for these. They turned. Colonel Kane stood at the entrance, surrounded by armed soldiers. His trap had worked. And now there was nowhere left to run. Takoda and Eleanor left the mountains before sunrise. Every hour mattered. Governor Hart's forces were already moving toward Apache territory. If they arrived before the truth, war would become inevitable. The journey was exhausting. Takoda's wounded shoulder slowed him, but he refused to stop. Several Apache scouts accompanied them and watched for danger along the way. By the second evening they reached a ridge overlooking Red Valley. Smoke rose from hundreds of campfires. Governor Hart's army had gathered outside the town. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. There were far more soldiers than she expected. Many settlers had volunteered to fight. Fear had spread quickly. Kane's lies were working. That night, Eleanor and Takoda secretly entered the town. With hoods covering their faces, they moved through quiet streets toward the governor's residence. Unfortunately, someone recognized Eleanor. Miss Hart. The shout echoed across the street. Within seconds, guards surrounded them. Takoda reached for his weapon, but Eleanor raised her hand. No. Do not fight. The guards escorted them directly to Governor Hart. When the governor entered the room and saw his daughter alive, relief flooded his face. Eleanor. He embraced her immediately. For a moment, he looked like a father rather than a governor. Then he noticed Takoda standing nearby. The relief disappeared. Why is he here? Because he saved me again. Eleanor replied. Governor Hart's expression hardened. You have been deceived. No father. You have. Eleanor placed Kane's documents on the table. The governor examined them carefully. As he read, his face grew increasingly troubled. Orders for false attacks. Lists of stolen supplies. Secret payments. Signed instructions bearing Kane's seal. The evidence was overwhelming. Governor Hart slowly sat down. This cannot be true. It is true, a voice answered. Everyone turned. The speaker was Samuel Reed, one of the governor's oldest advisors. I warned you about Kane months ago. The governor looked shocked. Why did you never tell me? Because I had no proof until now. Silence filled the room. At last Governor Hart looked toward Takoda. You risked your life to bring this evidence. Takoda nodded. Because war helps. Kane. Not our people. For the first time the governor truly saw the man standing before him. Not an enemy. Not a savage as the old stories claimed. A warrior willing to sacrifice everything for peace. Before anyone could speak again, a loud explosion shook the building. Windows shattered. People screamed outside. A messenger rushed into the room. Governor, the military camp has been attacked. Everyone stood. Who attacked it? The messenger swallowed nervously. Colonel Kane's men. They are blaming the Apache and calling for immediate retaliation. Takoda understood instantly. Kane knew the truth was exposed. Now he was trying to force the war before anyone could stop him. Governor Hart clenched his fists. How many soldiers remain loyal to Kane? Hundreds. Perhaps more. The governor looked at the map hanging on the wall. If Kane reached Apache territory before sunrise, thousands could die. He turned toward Tako Day. Can your people defend themselves? Yes. But many will perish. Governor Hart nodded slowly. Then we stopped Kane together. The room fell silent. No governor had ever spoken those words to anyone Apache warrior before. Eleanor felt hope for the first time. The governor extended his hand. Takoda looked at it for a moment. Then he accepted it. The gesture marked the beginning of something. Neither side had believed possible. An alliance. But their greatest battle still lay ahead. Before dawn, they would ride together toward the valley where Kane's army was already advancing. And there the future of both peoples would be decided. Before dawn, riders poured out of Red Valley. For the first time in living memory, settlers and Apache scouts rode in the same direction, not as enemies, not as allies. Governor Hart led one group. Takoda led another. Eleanor rode between them. The sight alone would have seemed impossible only a few weeks earlier. As the sun began to rise, they reached Eagle Valley. From the ridge above, they could see Colonel Kane's army advancing. Hundreds of soldiers moved across the open ground. Smoke rose from burning wagons behind them. Kane wanted everyone to believe the leaf. Apache had started the destruction. The governor studied the battlefield. If they continue another hour, they will reach the villages. Takoda nodded. Then we stop them here. Messengers were sent immediately. Several military officers loyal to the governor rode forward carrying orders demanding Kane surrender peacefully. The answer came quickly. One of the officers returned. His face was pale. Kane refuses. Governor Hart sighed. And there is no choice. The two forces moved into position. Takoda stood beside Eleanor for a moment before the confrontation began. Whatever happens, stay behind the lines. Eleanor shook her head. You know I cannot promise that. A small smile appeared on Takoda's face. That is exactly what worries me. For a brief moment they forgot the army, waiting below. Then the horn sounded. The battle had begun. Kane's forces advanced through the valley. Yet something unexpected happened. Many soldiers hesitated when they saw Governor Hart among the opposing side. Others were shocked to see Apache warriors standing beside settlers. Confusion spread through the ranks. Kane realized his control was weakening. He rode to the front. Do not listen to them, he shouted. The Apache have corrupted your governor. Attack. Some obeyed. Many did not. The battlefield became divided. As chaos spread, Kane ordered his most loyal men forward. The fighting intensified. Takoda moved across the battlefield with incredible courage. Instead of seeking glory, he focused on protecting people. He pulled wounded soldiers to safety, regardless of which side they belonged to. Again and again, men who had once feared him found themselves rescued by the Apache warrior. Word spread quickly. By midday, many soldiers began laying down their weapons. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Kane grew desperate. If he lost today, everything would be exposed. He spotted Eleanor helping injured civilians near the edge of the valley. A cruel idea entered his mind. He gathered several loyal riders. Take the governor's daughter. Now got the horsemen charged toward her. A scout shouted a warning. Eleanor turned just as the riders approached. Before they could reach her, Takoda saw the danger. Without hesitation, he spurred his horse forward. He rode directly into their path. The collision was fierce. Several attackers were thrown from their saddles. Others scattered. But Kane himself continued forward. The colonel raised a pistol and aimed it. Eleanor. Time seemed to slow. Tako Day saw the weapon. He knew he would never reach Kane in time. There was only one choice. He placed himself between them. The shot echoed across the valley. Takoda fell from his horse. Eleanor screamed. Everything stopped. Even the battle seemed to freeze. Governor Hart watched in horror. The Apache warrior, who had saved his daughter again and again, now lay motionless on the ground. Kane turned his horse and attempted to flee. But this time, nobody followed him. His own soldiers finally understood the truth. Several officers intercepted him before he could escape. The colonel's reign was over. Yet nobody cared about Kane anymore. All eyes were fixed on Takoda. Eleanor ran across the battlefield and dropped beside him. His eyes slowly opened. Relief flooded through her. The wound was serious, but he was alive. And for the first time since the conflict began, hope returned to the valley. The battle was over. For the first time in many years, the valley was silent. No war cries echoed across the hills. No armies marched toward destruction. Instead, settlers and Apache warriors worked side by side, helping the wounded. The sight alone felt like a miracle. Takoda was carried to a medical tent near the center of the valley. The bullet had passed through his side. The healers believed he would survive, but the next few days would be critical. Eleanor refused to leave him. Day and night she remained nearby. Sometimes she read to him. Sometimes she simply held his hand. When Takoda finally opened his eyes several days later, Eleanor was sitting beside him. A smile immediately appeared on his face. "You look tired." Eleanor laughed through tears. "You nearly died." Takoda glanced around the tent. "Then I suppose I owe many people an apology." The sound of her laughter filled the room. For the first time since the battle, both of them felt peace. Outside, important changes were already taking place. Colonel Kane had been arrested. The evidence collected by Eleanor and Takoda was presented publicly. Witnesses testified. Officers confessed. The entire conspiracy was exposed. The people of Red Valley were shocked. Many had nearly gone to war because of lies. Governor Hart addressed a large gathering in the town square. Settlers and Apache representatives stood together before the crowd. "For years we allowed fear to guide use," the governor said. "We judged people we did not know. We listened to rumors instead of truth. That ends today." The crowd listened quietly. No. One argued. Too much had happened. Too much had been learned. Governor Hart then surprised everyone. He invited Apache elders to help establish a permanent council between both peoples. The proposal was accepted immediately. For the first time, decisions affecting the territory would be made together. A new chapter had begun. Several weeks later, Takoda was finally strong enough to walk outside. The entire valley seemed different. Children from both communities played together. Traders exchanged goods openly. Families who had once feared each other now shared meals. The changes were small, but important. One evening, Eleanor and Takoda stood on a hill overlooking Red Valley. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and orange. Neither spoke for a while. They simply enjoyed the view. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "Do you remember the canyon?" Takoda smiled. "The day we met." "Yes." "Thought you were the most stubborn woman I had ever seen." Eleanor laughed. "And I thought you were the most mysterious man in the world." Their eyes met. The laughter slowly faded. Something more serious remained. Dakota gently took her hand. The future is uncertain. There will still be challenges. Not everyone will accept these changes. No, Eleanor replied, but we will face them together. Dakota looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into a small leather pouch. Inside was a beautifully carved pendant. It had belonged to his family for generations. Eleanor's eyes widened. Tako. Before she could finish, he spoke. You helped save my people. You helped save yours. You changed my life, and there is no future I wish to face without you. Eleanor felt tears fill her eyes. The answer came easily. Yes. The sun disappeared beyond the horizon as they embraced. Far below, lights began appearing throughout the valley. A new future was waiting. And together they were ready to build it. News of Eleanor and Dakota's engagement spread quickly across the territory. For many people, it was a symbol of hope. For others, it was difficult to accept. Years of fear and mistrust could not disappear overnight. Although peace had begun, some individuals still resisted change. A group of former supporters of Colonel Kane secretly gathered in the northern hills. Their leader was a bitter man named Mercer. He blamed Dakota and Eleanor for Kane's downfall. If peace succeeds, everything we fought for is lost, he told his followers. Mercer decided to make one final attempt to destroy the growing alliance. While preparations for the wedding continued, strange incidents began occurring. Supply wagons disappeared. Messages between settlements went missing. Rumors spread that Apache warriors were once again planning attacks. Governor Hart immediately recognized the danger. Someone is trying to reopen old wounds, he warned. Dakota agreed. Mercer and his followers were working carefully. They avoided direct confrontations and relied on fear instead. Eleanor refused to let their efforts succeed. Together she and Dakota traveled across the territory, speaking with both communities. They visited villages. They attended meetings. They listened to concerns. Wherever they went, they reminded people of everything they had already overcome. Slowly the rumors lost their power. People had learned an important lesson. They no longer accepted fear without proof. Mercer grew increasingly frustrated. His plan was failing. Then he made a desperate decision. A week before the wedding, he kidnapped Samuel Reed, the governor's trusted advisor. Mercer hoped the crime would be blamed on the Apache. Unfortunately for him, witnesses saw everything. The truth spread quickly. Dakota immediately organized a rescue mission. Settlers and Apache warriors volunteered together. It was another sign of how much the world had changed. Following clues through the mountains, the rescue party finally located Mercer's hideout. The criminals were hiding inside an abandoned mining camp. Dakota carefully planned the operation. No unnecessary bloodshed, he told everyone. We are building peace, not revenge. That night the rescue began. The settlers approached from one side of the canyon. Apache scouts approached from the other. Mercer's men never saw them coming. Within minutes the camp was surrounded. Most surrendered immediately. A few attempted to flee, but were quickly captured. Samuel Reed was rescued unharmed. Mercer himself tried escaping through a narrow mountain pass. Dakota caught up with him before sunrise. The two men stood facing each other on a rocky cliff. Mercer reached for his weapon. Dakota did not. This is over, Dakota said. Mercer stared at him. You could never understand. The old world is gone, Dakota replied. People are choosing something better. For a moment, Mercer looked around at the valley below. Settlers and Apache warriors stood together, working together, protecting one another. Everything he had hoped to prevent was already happening. At last he lowered his weapon. His fight was finished. Several days later, peace finally felt secure. The last major threat had been removed. Governor Hart announced a celebration that would unite both peoples. The wedding would take place during the gathering. Families traveled from every corner of the territory. Many came simply to witness history. As Eleanor watched preparations from her balcony, she felt excitement growing inside her. Years earlier, she had feared the world beyond her home. Now that same world was preparing to celebrate alongside her. Below, Dakota helped organize the festivities. Their eyes met across the crowded square. Both smiled. The long struggle was nearly over, and the happiest day of their lives was finally approaching. The day of the wedding arrived beneath a clear blue sky. People began gathering before sunrise. Settlers came from distant towns. Apache families traveled from villages across the mountains. No one could remember another day like it. For generations, both peoples had met on battlefields. Now they met in celebration. Colorful banners decorated red. Valley. Music filled the streets. Children laughed as they ran through the crowds. The atmosphere felt almost magical. Governor Hart stood at the center of the square, welcoming guests from every community. Only a year earlier, such a gathering would have seemed impossible. Now it was reality. As the ceremony approached, Eleanor stood inside her family's home surrounded by friends. She looked through the window toward the crowded square. Her heart raced. Not from fear, from happiness. The journey that had begun in a lonely canyon had brought her here. One of her friends smiled. Ready. Eleanor laughed softly. More than ever, across the square, Dakota prepared for the ceremony with the elders of his tribe. The respected warrior who had once carried the weight of endless conflict now carried something far more precious. Hope. An elder placed a hand on his shoulder. Your courage changed many lives. Dakota shook his head. Not mine alone. Many people chose peace. The elder smiled. That is what true leaders understand. Soon the music began. The crowd grew quiet. Everyone turned toward the ceremonial platform. Eleanor appeared first. Wave of admiration moved through the gathering. Moments later, Dakota stepped forward. Their eyes met. Nothing else seemed to exist. Not the crowd. Not the music. Only each other. Governor Hart escorted his daughter to the center of the platform. For a moment he looked at Dakota, the Apache warrior who had once been considered an enemy. The man who had saved his daughter multiple times. The man who had helped save the entire territory. With pride in his voice, the governor spoke. I am honored to welcome you into our family. Dakota bowed respectfully, and I am honored to stand beside your daughter. The ceremony continued beneath the warm afternoon sun. When the vows were finally spoken, cheers erupted across the valley. Settlers cheered. Apache families cheered. The sound echoed through the mountains. For the first time in generations, everyone celebrated together. The festivities continued long into the evening. There was music, there was dancing, there were stories. Shared around great fires. Old enemies became friends. Children, who had grown up hearing stories of hatred, played together without fear. As darkness settled over the valley, Eleanor and Dakota slipped away from the celebration for a few moments. They climbed a small hill overlooking the lights below. The valley sparkled beneath. The stars. Beautiful, Eleanor whispered. Dakota nodded. Not as beautiful as the future. She smiled and rested her head against his shoulder. For a while neither spoke. There was no need. Everything that mattered was already there. The peace they had fought for, the people they had helped unite, the love they had found. Years later, people would still tell the story. Not because of battles, not because of heroes, but because two young people dared to believe that understanding was stronger than fear. And because their love united two worlds that had once seemed impossible to bring together. As the stars shone above the peaceful valley, Dakota and Eleanor looked toward the future. Together. And they lived happily ever after.